You used to be that little. I know you don't remember, but I...
Breastfeeding is so important because it's hands down, it's fact that it's the best nutrition for babies. But there is so much gray area, right? It doesn't have to be all one or the other. So many families want to choose breastfeeding, to be honest with you. We're here to support you in that goal. We're also here to roll with the punches with you. So we're going to support you in any way that is needed to feed your baby. It can be really hard in the beginning, absolutely.
My first baby, I breastfed maybe 6 weeks. I gave up. I have no support. I didn't know how to go about it, so I quit. My second one, I breastfed for 6 months, and a very close friend of mine helped me with her breast milk as well. This one, it took us like 3 months to get a good latch. It was the WIC program, it was a lot of videos, a lot of support from my husband as well. So he was watching videos with me and he was like talking about it. Did you know skin to skin? And I'm like, what? Okay. So ask, research, like that's like you're your own best teacher.
Chiquis, I mean chiquis.
Moms need support. And so I like to think of us here at WIC as other teammate for this family and someone who's going to help them figure out what's the right choices for their family in their situation.
6:53. And you're all ready? We got about 20 minutes. My name is Diley. I currently reside in Phoenix, Arizona. Here we go. Even as a third-time mom, I didn't think I was going to be faced with a lot of the challenges that I had. One of the biggest challenges for me to overcome was being able to ask for help. I feel like a lot of women, moms especially, are not good at that. I, didn't produce milk right away. I struggled with latching him. My breasts were tender, I was sore, and I started to blister. They gave us formula as a supplement, and I was just like, at that point, I really felt like a failure because I was like, I can't even feed my baby and I don't want him to starve. So that's when I called in the lactation consultant, and she saw me for who I was and what I was going through, and she told me, she's like, you're gonna be fine. She's like, it's gonna take time. And I was like, okay. But that's all I needed to hear. You're gonna be okay. Yay! At that moment, I didn't feel ugly. I didn't feel like I was failing. I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. My kids, they see me, they saw these things. And I also wanted to have them see that, it's not always going to be rainbows and unicorns, and sometimes I feel like that's the perception. Knowing that I've been doing this for 16 months I can't believe it. I graduated from college. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. I've accomplished other things, but honestly, that was one of the biggest things because, it's not easy. Choice is important when trying to decide which path to go with feeding because it's going to be okay no matter what path you choose. And that it's okay to feel and be a mess. You can ask for help. There's people there who can help you.
Thanks. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. Please find that video on the NWA website for your enjoyment and for your sharing. Right now, we'll get into the panel discussion and hopefully bring all our panelists on screen. Awesome. Great. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm excited about today's conversation. Nakia, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you're so excited about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Nakia Sankofa. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Breastfeeding Committee. And I am really excited about the work that I do because I get to have an impact on families and communities in ways that are meaningful to me. And so USBC works from a policy and advocacy landscape. And so even though I don't get to see, babies with their families, I do know that the work we do makes a difference for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakia. How about Dali?
Yeah, good morning. Here where I am, it's morning time. My name is Daily Lister. I am a Indigenous breastfeeding counselor, a Indigenous full spectrum doula, mostly prominently for postpartum doula work. I am actually also an executive assistant for the Navajo Breastfeeding Coalition as well. Yat e she daily lister yenishia kis ani spider nishle, tatnasani bashish chin, kis ani parrot dashiche, tabahe dashinelle. That is my introduction in my Native culture. That's how we identify ourselves to our community and our family and friends. Welcome, everyone. And I do this work because of my lived experience, as well as those within the community that I serve. I want to be able to continue to do advocacy work and better the relationships between healthcare workers and those that provide services within our community in order to enhance this experience for moms, parents, caregivers within our rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully we can dive a little bit deeper into some of the advocacy work that you're doing, and hopefully you can share how we can support that. How about Ivan?
Hello, everybody, and happy Breastfeeding Week. My name is Ivan Zacarias, and I am the WIC director for Valle del Sol in Phoenix, Arizona. I serve as a registered dietitian and also as an IBCLC for the program here, and have been with the WIC program for over 10 years. For me, really, it's what was highlighted in that video through and through, just the impact that we have as a program and as IBCLCs with our community. It's just being somebody that's there as a lifeline, as a support person, as an advocate for the people that reach out to us and really need the help that they're looking for. So it's really what makes me excited about the work that I do.
Thank you, Ivan. Can we have, is it Pua?
It's Pua. Thank you.
Pua, I'm sorry. Pua.
Aloha kako o Pua Ka'ivi ko'u inoa. Greetings to all. My name is Pua Ka'ivi. I'm a registered nurse in IBCLC. I work at the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center, which is located on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. And I'm an Indigenous Native Hawaiian nurse. And I am a mother of 4. I've breastfed all my children. I have 15 grandchildren, and most of them have also been breastfed as we celebrate Breastfeeding Week. I have worked at the health center for almost 40 years. So reaching out to our community is very important to me, and reaching out to our Native Hawaiian women most especially. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for your 40 years of service to the WIC community. That's huge. We appreciate it. I think I got everyone. So let me introduce myself. I am Stacey Davis. I am the director for the Center of Innovative Practices in WIC at the National WIC Association. I am also an IBCLC. And I'm here in Detroit, Michigan, where I reside with my 4 sons, who I also breastfed. And so I'm glad to be able to have this conversation and talk about the impactful work that each of you are doing in your communities, and also being able to talk about how representation matters, particularly in your own communities, but communities across the nation. I kind of want to start with you, Ivan, because one of the things that the National WIC Association has charged ourselves with this year and moving forward is being able to strengthen and diversify the WIC workforce. Some of you may know that the National WIC Association recently was awarded $1.2 million from the Walmart Foundation to support and strengthen the WIC workforce by putting funds behind our WIC staff, our providing scholarships for registered dietitians and CPAs and CBPAs, and those who are seeking to become an IBCLC. And Ivan, you're an IBCLC, and we already know that IBCLCs, male IBCLCs are very, the numbers are very low. And so can you tell us about your journey and why you decided to be an IBCLC, and any other information you would like to share about your journey?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So, I mean, really, when I think back of my journey, I think that I was very fortunate to have a great mentor who took me under her wing and just really, maybe even without me knowing, pushed me to kind of go for the IBCLC because there was a huge need in my community. I used to work in the rural community for Pinal County, and a lot of our clients there, they were Spanish speaking, and unfortunately, as you know, there's not a whole lot of Spanish speaking dietitians or Spanish speaking IBCLCs, and there was that need that was there. And as I started just seeing more and more clients, I saw the importance of my role as not just as dietitian, but also having that knowledge and being able to support people as a IBCLC as well. And in terms of the goals that we have, I think that that's key really is having that mentorship, having somebody that's going to be encouraging other people that are going to be able to represent their communities, so that there is more diversity, that there's more access to those language services, so that somebody is able to seek out that help and feel comfortable with the person that they're seeing because of that understanding that that individual has for them.
Thank you. So I want to, for those who don't know what IBCLC is an international board certified lactation consultant, and there's 3 pathways to obtain your IBCLC. The most common one within WIC is pathway 1, and that's because WIC staff can use the hours that they've worked in WIC to apply towards their clinical hours. The other pathway is pathway 2, which is done through an academic institution, and pathway 3 is a mentorship or apprenticeship pathway, which is probably the most difficult, just because it's difficult to find mentors, and oftentimes it's even harder to find mentors that are not charging folks for their time. So thank you for that, Ivan. I wanted to talk about why, well, let's back up. So breastfeeding has evolved into a more of a privilege than a right, particularly in the wake of the recent formula shortages. This is in part due to the fragmented healthcare systems and the suboptimal policies for parental leave and support. Many families express a clear desire to breastfeed. Their infants just struggle to reach their breastfeeding goals. Um, and research has shown reasons behind lactation cessation or ending the breastfeeding are multifold, but frequently relate to the lack of access to personal and professional lactation support, as well as the need to return to work. And so that kind of brings us to this month's theme, is returning back to work and also returning back to school, depending on what your situation is. But how can we as providers and supporters and advocates mitigate some of the challenges that families are facing in terms of breastfeeding? And anyone can jump in.
I can start out. So I have three children of my own, and my youngest one just turned 2. And coming from specifically what you're talking about is a working mom, and trying to balance that life and wanting to accomplish these goals of breastfeeding and, being the perfect parent or the granola parent. There's all kinds of names for different types of parents these days, but, trying to reach those goals that you've set for yourself can be challenging. So for me, what I've done is one for my own personal self was being researching and knowing, my institution or whatever, wherever I was employed, the policies and procedures around, what they provide and what type of support they're willing to give me. But also depending on your work and the type of work that you do, also seeking, if there's no policy or anything in place, seeking that resource and talking to your supervisor one-on-one, and maybe starting to implement something within the workplace because you're seeing a lot more, people that are wanting or needing that support. And, so that is one way to start. Also reaching out to your community members, talking to nonprofits or other organizations that you might know of and asking questions and saying, how can I get this support? Within the Navajo Breastfeeding Coalition that I work for, we do a lot of advocacy work within the rural community of the Navajo Reservation to try to implement some of these changes so that those that are employed, within that setting can have these opportunities to be able to reach goals that they have set forth in breastfeeding their children and accomplishing a lot of other things outside of that within the maternal child health field. So I for one definitely recommend starting within your own in your own work and your own place of employment and seeing where you see change needed. And sometimes if you do have a policy, maybe it's time to update or make some changes that meet specifically, your location's needs.
Thank you. Nakia, do you have anything to add to that? I know your organization does a lot of advocacy around supporting parents that are returning to work.
Yeah, I would love to add to that. And I really love and appreciate the answer that was already given because I do think that advocacy starts at home. It starts with exactly where you are. And so while USBC is a national level organization, we are a membership organization. And our members are other organizations that serve families and community as well as national level organizations. Um, Coalitions are a large part of our network. And so, in addition to doing your direct work with your organization, I think that it's also really critical to find out what are the cultural, community, tribal, or state coalitions where you are. Sometimes people reach out to USBC, and the wonder is, oh, I want to get engaged with USBC. And the best way to get engaged with the United States Breastfeeding Committee is to engage with your local state, cultural, or tribal coalition. And also to connect with USBC by becoming a member, getting our weekly wire. We send out updates and action opportunities to organizations and individuals every single week with opportunities to sign on to letters and whatnot that helps to move your legislators. We're always looking to find people who may be in critical states or communities in order to kind of move the needle and make sure that we're talking to the right legislators or that we have people from a community to speak to their own legislators because it's really important. I'm trying to get myself set up in the chat, so I'll post a link to how you can join USBC's weekly wire and other subscriptions to some of our campaigns and to be connected to our website, which is really, really chock full of resources. But our goal is just recognizing that it is not really about the desire or choice to breastfeed. As Stacey already said, most people start out, they start feeding their baby with their own milk. And we break it down and we have policy breakdowns, systemic breakdowns, and breakdowns in our communities and our environments don't make it possible. And so not looking at a family or an individual to say, what's going on with your breastfeeding choice, but how did the systems fail you is what USBC looks at. And I think it's a different lens that we can all look at these processes and figure out how to fix systems. And that's what we do at USBC. And we have lots of policy priorities that we've been working on over the last year. I will send our 5 policy priorities that are important for us right now that our membership has voted on. I'll put a link to it in the chat so that everybody can be engaged and know about it. So I have 2 links coming your way.
Thank you, Nakia, for that and for the resources. Ivan or Pua, would you like to add anything to what Nakia and Dolly added?
No, I think that was great. I agree with all of that. That was really informative. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I did want to add something to that.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's great everything that was mentioned so far. We definitely have to look at our agencies and lead by example. I believe that that's very true, and keeping in mind that there's always going to be different barriers that different people experience. But one thing that I've always kind of really focused on is also providing that knowledge to the people that we're serving as well, is informing them of their rights, knowing that they do have the ability and right to pump at work. That there's different ways that they can engage that conversation with their employers, and seeing if now we know that there's a lot of jobs that have had the opportunity to work from home. So seeing how we can shift those policies to incorporate telework for those people that do want to stay home and that are trying to nurse their babies, trying to breastfeed or pump, how that could work for them as well.
Thank you. So moving on into a piece of this that also plays a role in the systemic barriers to breastfeeding success. I want to talk about why does representation matter, and what are some advantages of increased representation in lactation and maternal child health? And Dolly, can you talk about that, and then we'll get some feedback from the rest of the panelists.
Yeah, so representation matters. And this is, again, speaking from my own personal experience. I felt more comfortable and confident speaking to someone who understood, where I was coming from, who wouldn't, judge me or ask questions about why I did things a certain way, or, basically questioning my choices. And for me, I've always felt comfortable, with those who could relate to me. So being able to educate and increase the amount of individuals within our communities is important. I am currently on pathway 3 for my IBCLC. Indigenous people are a very low number within that IBCLC field. It is a very comprehensive program, and it is very intense. I say it's the doctors of lactation because it's a lot. And so all of my sisters and fellow individuals before me who have accomplished this goal, I am, right there and trying to accomplish the same thing, because we see the need within our community. We see families that are seeking this resource, but again, we don't have anybody who essentially looks like us or may have experienced some of the things that we do. Being from a rural community, we don't have a lot of resources. Like I work remotely here in the Valley, Phoenix, Arizona, but I also serve the community within the Navajo Reservation, which is very rural. And, your nearest clinic or even WIC clinic is anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour away, or even 2 hours, depending. And so trying to reach out and get those services and resources can be challenging because we don't have the means to be able to do that. And so having advocates in the community, or such as myself, who will go out and provide lactation education and support as an IB or as an Indigenous breastfeeding counselor, I'm able to go out and just kind of support. And then if need be, I can refer to an IBCLC. But even at that, if I do refer to an IBCLC, if it's somebody who, if we don't have any within our community, they're then having to travel again another hour, hour and a half away to be able to get the diagnosis they need for whatever further support they have or they want. And so, again, that's really why I do this work, is to be able to continue to provide that support and challenge, those within my own community to seek out and wanting to reach, some of these same goals, so that we can increase the numbers of moms that are breastfeeding and reaching those goals that they've set for themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have about, in the United States, I think there are less than somewhere between 18 and 19,000 IBCLCs across the United States. And I would say about 10% of those are of people of color. Not being able to break down those by race and ethnicity, as IBCLC, which is the credentialing body for the IBCLC, doesn't put out those demographics. But looking at, our communities, looking at our community-based groups, looking at WIC and similar organizations, we can see that oftentimes lactation professionals and advocates look less like people of color and look more like our white and Caucasian counterparts, which we all know can create additional barriers and challenges, and brings out a lot of biases when providing that support to families of color. Ivan, would you like to add to that, or Pua? I'm sorry, Pua.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in our state, it depends if you're in the urban or rural areas, as far as the disparities on, for example, Native Hawaiians or other Pacific Islanders. The population is greater in the rural areas versus the urban areas. And so the lactation support, whether it be an IBCLC or breastfeeding peer counselor, would be more available in the urban areas, and therefore would not be someone of your ethnicity, for example. But in the rural areas, you'd receive more care from someone of your ethnicity, more likely, but it would be lesser so of a higher professional level person. But you'd still receive more community level care, and that would be more available to you, as well as family and friends, community resources. But in the urban environment, it'd be opposite. So having that representation for our people, for Native Hawaiians, I'm saying specifically, it would be really helpful, especially in the demographic or statistical information, for us to have information that represents us, so that we have more understanding of the disparities, especially for the future.
Thank you. Ivan, did you have anything to add to that before we move on?
I would just like to add the importance of, and speaking about representation for people of color, the importance of also considering access to language, because I know that that's a barrier for a lot of people in our communities when it comes to being able to communicate and receive services, where there isn't that added burden for people with accessing a translator. And that seems to be something that we come short when it comes to just overall the community and IBCLCs, and knowing that we don't have a lot of people that speak those languages that are needed. And then for myself, representation also means the impact that we have on partners and family members. And I think that that's one of the main reasons that I did move on into becoming an IBCLC, because there was a time where I felt I couldn't have that conversation with my clients, because I wasn't somebody that should be talking about breastfeeding, but this is a conversation that needs to happen with anybody, male, female, partners, and I love that video because I've had that experience where the partner comes into the classroom or into the meeting, and then they start getting excited about talking about breastfeeding because they feel that they can join in on the conversation too, and then are able to support moms to continue breastfeeding.
Yeah, I definitely think that bringing in family members and support persons into the conversation kind of helps dispel some of the myths around breastfeeding, learning, where their educational level is and how they feel about breastfeeding, and determining how much of a support that they're going to be to the lactating parent is huge, especially dads, because I feel like dads are the biggest cheerleaders when they support breastfeeding, and those lactating parents are more likely to be successful than if they didn't have that supportive person in their life. Pua, I want to also, I'm hoping that you can share why cultural practice or traditions as they relate to breastfeeding are important for us, not only to preserve, but also to celebrate, because that's kind of like what each of the weeks this month are about, is celebrating cultural practices and traditions. So can you share a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you for the moment to share this. So, in Native Hawaiian traditional practices in regard to breastfeeding specifically, our community was called ahupua'a. So, in our community, that would mean from the mountain to the sea. And so that's the ahupua'a, not specifically like how the communities are today. So, everyone would take care of each other. Like a bartering system. So from the mountain to the sea, the farmer to the fisherman. And so in specifically in breastfeeding, the ohana or the family, everyone would help take care of each other. In today's motto would be, it takes a village. And so there would be wet nurses. So if a mom couldn't produce enough breast milk, or if she had to go and take care of a responsibility for the day or something like that, someone within the ahupua'a or the ohana would help with wet nurses. And so today, in the culture today, some families, ohana, they still practice the wet nurses within their own family. And so I think it's really important within our current cultures and practices to still honor that, because a lot of times Western thinking would not practice that. They'd be like, oh, don't do that, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be sharing, or things like that. So trying to honor and celebrate what traditional practices still honor within their own family. We need to remember within our Western practices what some traditional cultures still honor and celebrate that.
Thank you. Dolly, can you also share and then tell us how, I know a lot of organizations, including National WIC Association and those similar, really struggle with making connections with the Indigenous community. And so hopefully in your response and responding to the previous question, but you can also share some strategies on how organizations outside the Indigenous community can connect with your community in a way that is respectful and welcomed.
Yeah, so thank you, Pua. I always like hearing about other cultures and, even the similarities that we share, the village and the community, and just, giving back to our families. Within our Native communities, we share the same, teachings and the same understandings. This year's theme for Indigenous Milk Medicine Week is From the Stars to a Sustainable Future. And a lot of the information or a lot of the linkage there goes back to our Mother Earth, which we as Native people, find as something that is very important. Mother Nature, Mother Earth, she provides us a lot of things. We have the water, the land, fire, wind, all the different elements of life. Without all those things, Earth wouldn't be here. A lot of, we wouldn't have trees, we wouldn't have birds, all the things that are living are because of what Mother Earth provides, as well as Father Sky. So, putting those elements together and understanding that, and then also respecting and honoring our ancestors and all of those who provide life. So even as us as women or individuals who provide nurturing and being able to sustain our future, and build on that. So, and breastfeeding is a big factor in that. As far as supporting, entities supporting, within our communities. Of course, there's a lot of work to be done there in just understanding and being respectful of the elements that are within our lands and within our families. And one thing that I always mention when I'm asked this question, how can we support the Native community or the rural communities? And I always say, go and visit the land, go and visit the people, ask questions. You're going to find somebody, that might be like, why do you want to know? And what are you going to do with the information I give you? But you'll also come across people who are, may ask those same questions and then share and give you the knowledge that they feel, is needed by you to be able to make changes. But if you do go back to, the lands and you ask questions and you do that, the thing is to not just stop there, right? The thing is to actually move forward and keep moving forward to make those changes or provide support to that community. We see it, far too much where everybody's like, let's come together and let's make a plan and let's make some change. But then all of a sudden it just comes to a standstill. So, that's one of my biggest things is just go into the community and ask questions. Go into the local WIC offices and ask questions, right? What's working? What isn't working? And then, of course, like I believe it was Nakia had mentioned, USBC works with a lot of nonprofit organizations, grassroots organizations. Go and reach out to those coalitions and so forth, and ask, what kind of changes are you guys looking for? How can we help? How can we support? Because again, you're going to the root of the community. Those are individuals who live there, who understand and who work with the community. So they would be, of course, individuals who can help you understand how everything is working, and just building on those relationships. And again, continue asking the questions and be involved, not just behind the scenes, but also in the forefront as well.
Thank you. And that segues us into a great question that I want to point towards Nakia as we wrap this up and leave some time for our audience to be able to ask some questions. Nakia, this month we're celebrating breastfeeding, work, employment, and of course those who are going to school, because that's equally as important. And it showcases the impact of paid leave and workplace support and the emerging parent norms on breastfeeding through the lens of the parents themselves. And so my question to you is that I know there has been some wins and losses in this arena of getting parents the support that they need. However, I'm hoping that you can share more about the recent passing of the PUMP Act, which gives breastfeeding, chest feeding, and pumping workers a right to receive break time in private places to be able to pump, and not a bathroom, to be able to pump for their infants. And hopefully you can share more about that, and also share of any other legislation that is in the works that we need to be aware of. You're on mute.
Trying to be a good citizen. All right. I said that's such a big and crunchy question, and I have a lot to share about it, but I'll do my best to kind of keep it brief. I think that the theme for National Breastfeeding Month is This Is Our Why. And when we think about the recent passage of the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, um, those are perfect examples of this is why we are so deeply engaged in this fight and in this battle to really move the needle and change the landscape for families. So the Pump Act allows an additional 9 million workers who've not been previously federally protected with reasonable break time and a private non-bathroom space to pump during the workday. And all lactating workers have now gained the right to file a lawsuit if their employer fails to comply with these very simple but impactful accommodation requirements. So before there were 9 million people, including teachers and nurses, airline workers who still aren't protected, who now have the federal protection and the right to sue if their rights are not accommodated. PIFA on the other side is for working parents now have the right to reasonable accommodations for pregnancy, childbirth, and related medical conditions, including lactations. And I think that they really work together in concert. In the context of lactation, it can include simple as a uniform adjustment. These workplace protections are transforming the experience of new parents who will face far fewer challenges than the generations before them, and they can finally protect both their family's health and their economic well-being. These laws are major drivers for culture change, and as these laws are implemented, and both laws are fully implemented right now. Pump Act went into effect right away after signage in December, and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act went into effect in terms of being implemented in June of this year. These accommodations are very easy to implement, and we're just really looking forward to hearing the stories of success and how it's making the differences and changing lives for families. That's one part of the question. And I think you said what's next and what's continuing to be on the horizon. One big thing is some groups were actually not protected via these recent law changes. Congressional workers, and that includes everybody from congressional staff members to people who may be cleaning offices on Congress or on the Hill, are no longer protected just because of an error in the legislation. And so we are taking very active steps to make sure that these groups regain those rights. And also another group that was not covered with the Pump Act and its recent change in legislation are airline workers, so flight crew, including pilots and flight attendants. So pilots and flight attendants were not covered. And so there are active bills moving through Congress to close these gaps. And parents can visit our Take Action webpage. I'll put a link in there so that you can raise your voice to help make sure that these other classes of workers are also protected.
Thank you. You gave us a lot to chew on and a lot for us to be able to take action on. Is there any other things that you feel like we can do to support the work of USBC, but also support the needs of parents across the nation?
I think that the biggest thing that if you are an individual, I think, like I said earlier, the biggest thing that you can do is find out what groups are convening in your community and be a part of them and apply your might to this effort. USBC uses a collective impact framework for our work. And so it might not be the group that you think. Maybe it's not a breastfeeding coalition. Is it a worker advocacy organization that's doing a lot of work? And maybe they don't have lactation on their radar because they're working on paid leave and on union and organizing. And so get engaged with them and find out those connection points so that you can move this agenda forward in the places where you are. USBC, our membership, we're very much seeking to expand it and to bring in voices of communities and people who don't normally have a seat at this table. And yes, that means breastfeeding organizations, but it also means allied organizations that are doing work and are engaging in aspects of the systemic struggle. I'm not going to call it a systemic struggle because struggle is an important word that I would like to leave away from. but from this systemic effort that we're making, this wins that we're making, right? In order to really just change this landscape for families. I know that families and USBC has our vision of thriving families and communities, and we know we can make it happen together, and not just from a breastfeeding community, but from all of the allied communities that are fighting for workers' rights and for human rights for communities and families.
Thank you. And I want to open this question up to the rest of the panel. Please share what some important initiatives your organization or you as an individual are doing or currently working on, and how can we in the WIC community and other communities help support those initiatives and be able to advance that work. I'll start with you, Ivan, and then
well, I mean, for me, I'm very appreciative of being part of this panel because it has a lot to do with what I think about in the work that I do. And really, something that has been an initiative for me that I've been working on is just representation. I do try to encourage and be a resource to other people of color that are trying to go into the IBCLC, people who are Spanish speaking, just making sure that I'm doing my part to encourage that and finding ways that I can either support or mentor people. And I think that the best way that we can help each other is just really reminding ourselves to be that mentor to anybody that might have that interest. And I know earlier it was mentioned that Pathway 3 is difficult to accomplish because of the difficulty of finding mentors or ones that are not charging. I'm one of those people that feels that we have been in that spot where we needed a mentor, and we've had that mentor, so that we should give back and do that as a free service. Mm-hmm. And then also just identifying people that might need you to just give them that push. I know that was something that I needed. I never spoke up for myself to become an IBCLC, but somebody identified me and helped me get to that point.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Each one teach one and reach one, right? Yeah. Pua.
Sorry, searching for that unmute button.
Yes, it's a struggle, right?
We don't have any particular initiative right now. Something that I've been working on for years was to create a mommy's cafe for our moms, so they would have a safe place to come and support each other. There's always been one thing or another that has come in the way of that, whether it be space, personnel, financial budget, things like that. So that is something that's been on our radar for a while that we would like to have happen for our community.
Awesome. Is there a place where if we have some audience members who want to donate, maybe some time or some financial resources, is there a place where we can provide that support?
Yes. I believe there is a place. Yes.
Okay. All right. If you want to share that in the chat, we welcome that. Dolly, any last words?
Yeah, so it's nice to hear all the initiative advocacy that's happening across, all the different areas that we work in. One of the big things that we're doing within our work is really just pushing out the importance of just breastfeeding and the support that's needed within our own urban community. We struggle a lot with a lot of different resources, just even your regular resources of like fresh water. So one of the big things is that we are continuously trying to advocate and get support to be able to provide breast pumps to moms, especially those who return to work and just need that extra support. Some of our WIC offices are not necessarily funded in a way where they can continuously give a pump to a mom. And then, of course, working through state or federal insurance, Medicaid, things like that, access. It's a process to get a pump, through your insurance, if that's the insurance you have. And so doing a lot of advocacy and trying to be able to also, support our breastfeeding counselors that are doing the work within the community. We have a lot of doulas who are trained and certified as an Indigenous breastfeeding counselor, and doing the work within the community, but we don't see the financial gain from it like others within the urban community. So really trying to advocate to get our services funded under Access and Medicaid and those type of resources, because again, that community is what is really needing that support from IBCLCs and so forth. So really trying to get that in works for within our nation.
Thank you. Now I want to open the floor up for any last comments or I don't know, any charges that you want to give the audience to move forward today throughout the rest of the month and beyond.
That Medicare insurance topic you just brought up, that is something that needs to be worked on so that more people can be paid for the services that are provided. Because although private insurance may pay for IBCLCs and other lactation counselors, they don't. Our main community members are Medicare, and so we do not get funded. So yeah, that is a good point. That was something that I meant to say earlier. So thank you for raising that issue.
You mean Medicaid?
Yes, sorry.
Medicaid.
Yes, I say that all the time.
No worries.
you.
The two could be confusing.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I do think Medicaid is challenging in the reimbursement of services around breastfeeding, and in many states limited to the first 60 days postpartum, which is, a challenge within itself. But I do see some growth happening in states such as Michigan around providing and reimbursing for services such as doula support, which we know doulas help are so impactful to positive pregnancy and birth outcomes. And so I celebrate states who are following that lead or have already, initiated and embarked on ensuring that families have access to doula services, because that's such a holistic approach to
health.
ensuring.
Yeah.
Mm,
And
yes.
back in the day, when I first became a nurse, we used to have home health services that provided so much to increasing breastfeeding outcomes, but it all stopped because the insurance was not reimbursing for that service. And so it negatively impacted our breastfeeding outcomes, long term for not just our community, but for many.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that said, I want to thank everyone on our panel today. We have come to the end of our panel discussion. I want to express my most sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists, Nakia, Pua, Ivan, and Dolly, for sharing not only your expertise and insights, but also your personal experiences and your own journeys in parenting, but also in your experiences with supporting communities across the nation. I want to share with our audience that the National WIC Association will be sending out an evaluation survey, and we will be offering one cert for today's webinar. On behalf of the National WIC Association, I want to thank you all for being a part of this amazing event. And I encourage you to continue to advocate for breastfeeding support, promoting cultural sensitivity, and also fostering an environment of inclusivity. And that ends today's panel. Thank you so much.